So welcome everyone to Sharing Community Vitality. I'm Anna Hunt from QUESCREN, so the Quebec English-speaking Communities Research Network. I'm going to be providing tech support today, but before continuing, I'd like to acknowledge the Indigenous peoples of all the lands that we are on today. So whilst we meet on a virtual platform, Concordia and myself currently are located on unceded Indigenous lands. The Gunyaga Nation is recognized as custodians of these lands and waters. Jajagi, Montreal, is historically known as a gathering place for many First Nations, and today it is home to a diverse population of Indigenous and other peoples. And I'd like to reiterate that we do respect the continued connections, the past, the present, and the future in our ongoing relationships with Indigenous and other peoples within the Montreal community and beyond. So I am now going to pass you over to our moderator, and I will spotlight your video. So Lorraine O'Donnell is, let me make sure I get your title correct, I've been working with you long enough, but is Research Associate and Assistant Professor at QUESCREN and Concordia.
Hi everyone, and welcome to our event today. In early 2018, the Secrétariat aux relations avec les Québécois d'expression anglaise of the Government of Quebec, which we fondly call the Secretariat, invested significant funds in a project to support the vitality of English-speaking Quebec. The Secretariat awarded a total of $950,000 to QUESCREN and 4 partner groups serving English-speaking communities in order to create research projects, conferences, and outreach activities that connect educators, artists, community organizations, and the provincial government. QUESCREN managed the overall project. It's worth noting that the Secretariat had been created only a few months before. It was launched in November of 2017. So awarding these funds was a significant early step for the Secretariat, which since then has created a regular support fund for groups serving English-speaking Quebec, and you can read about that on the Secretariat's webpage. In today's event, called Sharing Community Vitality, the 5 partners will report back on our activities funded by the early 2018 grant. Each short presentation will be followed by a 5-minute Q&A session. Before we get started, I'm pleased to introduce Mr. William Flock. From the start, he has headed the Secretariat in his role as Secrétaire Adjoint, and he will provide some opening remarks for today's event. William?
Thank you, Lorraine, and thanks for everybody for taking the time to join us here today. This is very much, I think, a celebration of a number of the initiatives, important initiatives that community organizations and institutions are undertaking in their region, in their sector, to the benefit of the English-speaking community. Maybe I'll just say a couple of words just to put this in context. As Lorraine mentioned, this early agreement that we entered in with Concordia and QUESCREN was in a certain way, it was actually our first funding step, if you like. And at that time, we didn't know that we'd have a funding program. Of course, it's grown, and we're very pleased with the set of resources we have now. This series of initiatives and this initial agreement with Concordia QUESCREN really emerged from a series of consultations that we put together very quickly after the creation of the Secretariat. And it's kind of remarkable to think back, but we were almost a harbinger of the future because we knew we needed to talk to and wanted to talk to a lot of organizations in a short period of time. And the idea of organizing a physical tour, that occurred to us. We would go to all the regions and so on. But of course, in the time frame, that proved impossible. So we actually turned to Hugh Maynard and Quanglo to organize with us a series of online virtual consultations. Little did we know that we were setting ourselves up to live in this pandemic period that we're all experiencing. And we had, the normal share of technical glitches, but I would say it went off very, very well. And we had the opportunity to hear from, I think, 60 or 70 organizations in a period of about 3 weeks. So that was very helpful. And we then organized 2 follow-up sessions face-to-face in Montreal, one at Concordia in the middle of February 2018, and then one in early March at McGill. And in both of those cases, we brought together a good cross-section of organization institutions to in a sense, validate what we'd heard and then to consider what some of the implications would be. And without going into all chapter and verse of that, I can say that clearly what we heard is that English-speaking Quebec felt like a square peg in a round hole. They felt that they were not at the table making decisions, that there were important things going on vis-a-vis the government of Quebec in which English-speaking communities didn't feel considered or included, and that was going to be, a major challenge that the Secretariat would attempt to address in its work. We also heard very clearly that people felt that they were taking on huge, ambitious mandates and didn't have the resources or the means to feel that they could successfully meet those mandates. So as a result, we then started, and perhaps with my team, we've often had this internal kind of line somewhat ruefully shared between us, is that you have to be careful what you ask for. Because based on that community input, we asked for the resources to be able to create a funding program, which we are now been operating for 2.5 years. And we're thrilled with what it's able to do, but it is a huge demand on our staff time and resources. But I'm really pleased that we're going to have the chance to hear from some of the first organizations that we're able to be somewhat mobilized with our support. And I would say just across the board now, when I look at, the passage of time since that first phase of the work, the first quarter, you could say, of the organization, of the work of the Secretariat, the partnerships we've built up and the interactions we're having with networks and organizations and institutions across Quebec, I think we've really tried to build on some of the work the community is already doing. We're not claiming that we're the first ones there. We're saying where communities are doing good work and needed more resources to be more successful, we've tried to provide that. And I think we're very, very pleased with a lot of the progress we see on so many fronts. So I don't want to, how would I put it? I'm very eager to have all of us have this opportunity to hear from some of the early actors in our relationships to share with you those results. Of course, we have bilateral relations. We know people report to us internally, so we have a certain sense of it. But I'm very eager to have this information shared to a broader audience. And I would thank Lorraine and Anna and the other folks at QUESCREN who have been such marvelous facilitators for this initiative, and in other respects, what a pleasure they are to work with. So with that, I'll turn it back to you, and I'm very much looking forward to this conversation.
Thank you, William. I'm now pleased to introduce our first speaker, Christy Huff. Christy is Project Manager at the English Language Arts Network, or ELAN, for the ACE project. Christy?
Hello, thank you for this opportunity. I will dive right in. One of my favorite author researchers, Renee Brown, posits that we are wired for connection, and ACE is a connection model. We developed it after Guy Rogers, the executive director from ELAN, and I had a conversation at another partners meeting 6 years ago to say, artists should connect more with Quebec schools and communities across the province, but especially with schools, they hadn't figured out how to make that happen. How did they get their large network of English artists to connect with schools? Thanks to funding from the federal government, we had developed ACE as a model and had tested it, identified the key learnings, realized what was needed to sustain and build connection over time. And in an incredible moment of synergy, the Secretariat was born and invited us to apply to be one of its first projects. So next slide, the ACE concept, with a beautiful image that is on the library windows of Sunnyside Elementary School in Stansted, Quebec. So the ACE concept is that by supporting artists, community organizers, and educators to connect and develop projects with and for members of their community, and their students, of course, we create innovative opportunities for lifelong learning, developing skills and connections that contribute to personal and community vitality for everyone involved. And we see this model working when we are able to identify and vet artists who have the ability to facilitate transformative learning, creative processes with educators that also serve a community need. Our model is complex And when we went out and did research across the country and the globe, people said, wow, that's ambitious. I don't know if you can do all three. If you can connect all three through projects like this, that's a lofty goal. And we did it. We did it over and over again. It works in urban, rural, regional, remote settings. And we definitely know what helps to make it work. The partnerships, though, I always want to assert in any audience we're talking to that art education partnerships that bring artists into the schools and communities, they don't replace the role of a skilled art educator who works in a school. And we must always champion our teachers, especially in these difficult times, to say that we respect them, and what we do is to enhance arts learning and to help build community connections, because it is win-win for everyone involved. Next slide. So we, in our learning journey, from the successes and the mistakes, we identified new school communities that can benefit most from ACE facilitation. So we identified that you need to see a genuine need for capacity building from the schools in that they lack access to resources. That could be financial, artistic, or experience resources in having this kind of collaborative project take place. They need to have experienced initiators taking on the role of project coordinator. And those people need to value art-based learning and to have been in their schools for at least a year before they're really able to build a project of this complexity and depth. So we identified these readiness characteristics, and we had a team able to support schools to implement our model, thanks to the funding from the Secretariat. So I'm going to advance one more slide, Anna. So the ACE in Action model shows the puzzle pieces that are necessary, which is the artists. We help to equip artists to ensure that they are prepared. We have wonderful partnerships in addition with LEARN and the CHSSN that help us to provide professional development for the artists around working with youth in education settings, to be aware of mental health needs of youth, and to be able to connect with educators so that the time artists spend is not taking away from the core business of education. Rather, it is contributing to subject matter learning and to competency development of youth, which is incredibly important in terms of getting educator buy-in. Every project goes through a process with us where we do connect, collaborate, create, and celebrate. So connecting is about finding inspiration. We work with the people on the ground who would like to have a project and find out where their hearts are, what their goals are. The projects have been impressive in the amount that what they want is to connect with the First Peoples of the land that they are on, and the First Nations communities in particular, whose students are part of their student body, or who they just want to care about and learn more about. They care about intergenerational connection deeply, and the projects almost always end up having intergenerational connection, and it is not prescribed. It's a desire that is there when we start having conversations about what can inspire. They explore the lived experience of the students, of their parents, of the multiple generations who have lived there historically, look at identity, relationships, and belonging, the importance of space and geography. And they do that through dance, through drama, through music and sound, through literary arts, visual arts, and in so many different specialties, I couldn't begin to list them. What ends up coming out of that is this beautiful creative process of learning. Oh, that I always have trouble talking about because it's so touching. Like if I could just show you every project that happened and how beautiful they are, you would be as moved as I am in my head. They have vernissages, performances, and art installations to celebrate and really bring together students, educators, parents, families, communities. It's a beautiful methodology to create connection. And this picture exemplifies it. It is a celebration at Pierre Elliott Trudeau Elementary School. We were asked to support up to 12 schools over 2 years, and we worked with 20. Some are still finishing, but every one was beautiful in what came out of it so far and will continue to be. And we've seen that once a school starts, they want to continue. 80% of our projects from year one continued in year two, and we look forward to the future where out of the 20, almost all of them can continue to build a connection because of the tools and supports we've offered.
Thank you very much, Christy. Christy, while we wait for other people to put questions in, I have one.
Okay.
I wonder if you could tell us about the Lower North Shore experience.
So the Lower North Shore started with us in the first test phase and continued with us with a vision of creating an air model, artist in residence, but they said to breathe our air. They really wanted to inspire artists to come to the Lower North Shore. It was a place where they said before what we did, they had fast food art. An artist would fly in, do maybe a day or two, and fly back out. Whereas we sent people for at least a month. It took a lot of organizing on the collaborate phase to do that. But they are now on year 4 of 5 of having different artists come into their communities. And it has been beyond inspiring to see what's happened there. And we are looking forward to the year 5 celebration after COVID. In year 4, their artists had to fly home after 1 week, unfortunately. So we will continue, but it is a beautiful thing to see an artist be able to go and engage in remote communities. And it's transformative for the artist. You know, our artists have said from going there, they had been world travelers, and it was the biggest culture shock of their lives to experience Lower North Shore. So
there is another question, Christy, but maybe for those who aren't familiar, could you tell people where the Lower North Shore is and how you get there?
Oh my goodness, I'm not so good at geography, but you would, if from Montreal, have to fly, usually depending where you go, to Sept-Îles and then on another flight. Once you're in the community, there's no roads, so you're taking snowmobiles and helicopters. Just that is an experience for the artists. So, you know, you're talking a full day of travel from Montreal within the province of Quebec for the far northeastern sort of segment.
Thank you. Here's a question. What's the future post-COVID? Do you hear that there will be a rush to get back to live arts and culture?
I would love for there to get back to live arts and culture. And again, this author who I love, I encourage people to look at her work around this. It's Renee Brown in Braving the Wilderness. And she says that arts experiences contribute to a life filled with a sense of meaning, increased positive affect, an increased sense of social connection, and a decreased sense of loneliness. All essentials of a healthy, happy life. And I think we need ACE. I think as a model in the recovery from COVID, we have something we've tested, we know how to do it, and that it brings beautiful results to people. So we hope that people will use all this work we did and cared so deeply about to contact us. If you have a heart to do an art community education project, or just arts and communities, or just arts and education, we will make that possible.
Thank you, Christy. Speaking of which, someone said, where can we find more information on the celebrations and artists involved?
So we'll be rebuilding the section of ACE to highlight the projects of 2018 to 2020 became 2021 as we wrap up this year, because we're still not finished. But our artistinspire.ca website profiles all of the artists we've been able to identify in the province who have the skills to facilitate educational experiences from 0 to 109. You know, used to say 0 to 99, but we have lots of plus 100s. So if you're looking for a qualified artist, just go on artistinspire.ca. It's run by ELAN Art Ed, and every artist has been vetted. We know them, and we will be very, very happy to connect you with someone. You just contact us and we can work through finding the perfect artist for you.
Christy, Is there a growth of digital programs adapted to distance learning?
We hopped on the digital programming immediately when COVID hit because of other funding we had that required us to pivot immediately to digital. So we trained all of our artists. They were offered virtual offering training, because to do art facilitation well takes some practice. And so we have a whole guide to online virtual art teaching. Any of our artists are offered professional development, and there's a search button. So when you go on the artistinspire.ca, connect with artists, there's a search button for has experience facilitating virtually. So it's really easy to find people on our website. And we, last count, 160 people had applied, and nearly all of them qualified. Not everyone is profiled at this time because some who didn't want to facilitate virtually took their profiles down, but there's a very good selection of highly qualified people from all over the province.
And a final question, Christy. You're lucky because we're catching up to our time. We were a little quick at the beginning, which is great. In 1 minute, can you? This is a question from Glenn Patterson. Can you give a sense of the availability of arts education, including music, across the province? Like, what's the variety? Obviously Montreal would be well served, but out of Montreal, let's say.
Out of Montreal, it's very hit and miss. For an English artist outside of Montreal, in many communities, there is not a single professional artist, let alone a professional artist who then has a heart for facilitating educational experiences for others. So yes, Montreal is dense and rich, and the regions have less. Our mission is to equip more professional artists in the regions who don't have the facilitation experience with that possibility. So our next layer forward is to do more professional development. We'd like to do more mentoring of artists in regions who could become qualified to facilitate with educators. But it really varies based on where you are.
Thank you very much, Christy. I'll now introduce our second speaker, Fabian Will. He's going to be talking about the work of the Eastern Townships Resource Centre, where he is Executive Director. Fabian?
Hello, everyone. Well, thank you for having me. I want to take this occasion to thank the Secretariat for this financial support. It's important. It shows that the Quebec government values the work we are doing here in the Anglophone community. And I wanted to thank also QUESCREN for this uncomplicated and unbureaucratic management of this grant. This made a very positive change to many other existing programs that are out there. For those who don't know the ETRC, we are an archive center for the study of the Eastern Townships. We are located at Bishop's University, and we collect and preserve the Anglophone heritage of the Eastern Townships, what is now S3, but the historical Eastern Townships are a little bit bigger, and we make it available for research. This grant gave us the chance to share these archival treasures that we are having with the community. And to reach out to groups that traditionally are not working with primary archival resources. And this in a way, without knowing, that matched perfectly our current reality during this pandemic. From the beginning, we planned 2 separate projects to share the Eastern Townships history. The first one, you can put the next slide. And I think we only see Lorraine and not me, if that is. So the first one was the creation of educational materials for elementary school and high school. There is a total of 3 different thematics. They are ready to use lessons. They're both in French and English, available for free on our website. And all lessons are based on archival materials that we have in our archives and that we are now able to bring to the classroom. The first one that you're seeing is embedded in the curriculum topic of the Canadian federal regime, and the students learn through the analysis of several archival primary resources. For example, questions that are raised are considering the social and political context of the time, how much weight can a woman's opinion have in this time, and these questions will lead students to reflect on the different groups of belonging that are present in the Eastern Townships. The next slide, please. The second tool is about the Loyalists. The Eastern Townships are said to have been developed by the Loyalists who came from the United States. And very often when we have public events, people are coming to me and they're referring and introducing themselves as descendants of Loyalists. But the question we want to raise here is this really true? Did they really develop the Eastern Townships? Is it a myth or a reality? And what role did these individuals truly play in the history of the Eastern Townships? The documents that the students are working on, they will allow to answer these questions. And the next slide. The last thematic is about or is focusing on the region's agriculture through history. The students, they read diaries from farmers in the beginning of the 19th century, analyze them, and students then will write their own diary describing the daily life of Eastern Townships farmers. Especially in the beginning of the pandemic, we saw increased traffic on our website for these materials, where I think some teachers were quickly looking for new stuff that is easy to use during homeschooling and so on. The second project was also to share townships history, but this time with a broader public. While there are tons of academic publications about the Eastern Townships out there, we were looking for something with a lower entry level. We wanted to reach out to people who are not historians, who are not academics, but who want to know more about the region and its unique past. So what we did was to create the podcast series, Discover Your Past. Oh, you can put the next slide, thank you. And in 25 episodes, our host is talking about the development of the historical Eastern Townships. We are currently publishing every Friday a new episode, and they're available through our website and by the magic of podcasting through every podcast app like Google Podcasts or Spotify. So as we're all spending a lot of time at the moment at home, this might give you also the chance to learn a little bit something new about our history, and that we can think about something else than COVID. So I invite you to have a look at these episodes. They're fairly short, 8 minutes, and about different topics that are relevant to the development of the Eastern Townships. While there was a really specific outcome for both of these projects, so the educational materials and the podcast, I also want to outline that with this grant, we should not underestimate the organizational learning through these projects. And doing these educational materials, doing these podcasts, assembling all the knowledge around, that permitted us to build on and to continue in the future with this project. Thank you.
Thank you, Fabian. We have time for a couple of questions. I can get the ball rolling, Fabian.
Yes.
So I'm interested in women's history. I looked up the educational resource for Minnie, I'm forgetting her.
Minnie Bowen.
Minnie Bowen. So could you tell me the type of impact it might have to someone, a child from the Eastern Townships, say, or from an English-speaking child from Quebec, to read about an English speaker of 100 years ago?
I think what we try to show also with this tool is that when we read about history, it's especially from this time, it's a masculine white history. So, and putting the focus on Minnie Bowen, a very modern woman for this time, being a poet, being involved in politics, shows maybe a different, gives a different perspective on the history, that there were also other groups involved in the development of Canada, of Quebec, and yeah.
Thank you. Are there any last questions for Fabian? I have another one.
Yes.
Tell me, what was your favorite photo chosen for the pedagogical guides?
Well, I like. Well, there are pictures in the tool of agriculture where we see really a different reality from that time. There's kids are doing really heavy work, and it makes us think about how I raise my kids, what they are doing all day, and how reality for them changed as well. So I have there's a picture like two boys, maybe 8 years old, plowing the field with two horses. I mean, that's pretty hard work and a pretty hard reality at that time. So I like the pictures that are like a window in an almost forgotten time.
Thank you so much, Fabian. I'm pleased now to turn to our third speaker, Helena Burke. She will be talking about the work of the Council for Anglophone Magdalen Islanders, where she is Executive Director. Helena?
Hi, everybody. Thank you for the invitation, QUESCREN, for this event, and thank you for asking us to present our project. I'd like to take a moment to thank the Secretariat for the funding that we received to develop this project, and also thank you to QUESCREN for all the work that they did to support us in moving forward with this project. And as Fabian said, thank you for the minimal bureaucratic reporting, and it was really nice. So just before we change the slide, I'll just do a little bit of an intro or background. For those of you that don't know CAMI, CAMI is a nonprofit regional association that's located in the Magdalen Islands, and we represent the English-speaking minority community in this area. Our community has two main economic industries on the islands, with the first being the lobster fishery and the second being tourism. It's important to note that in the English-speaking community of the Magdalen Islands, that the lobster fishery is very prevalent. That can be seen, statistically seen, since we only make up 5% of the island's total population, but we hold 1/3 of the 325 lobster licenses that exist in the Magdalen Islands. So that just gives you a pretty good idea of how reliant we are on the lobster fishery. In 2008, we started to work on tourism development with some partners, and our goal was to look at how we could diversify the local economy and create other opportunities for business and job development outside the fishery. Since we have all of our eggs in one basket, we thought it was a good idea to start looking at how we could create other opportunities within the community in the event that the lobster fishery ever went in decline. At that time, CAMI as an organization owned and operated 3 small museums, all of which that were developed on the backs of volunteers and ran on the backs of volunteers up until the early 2000s, when we started to receive a bit of an increase in Canadian Heritage Corps funding. And in 2012-13, as a result of the tourism development planning, we were able to get a substantially large project from Canada Economic Development to do a renovation and expansion project within our main historical heritage complex, which was the Little Red Schoolhouse Museum, the Veterans Museum, and a memorial park. So this renovation and expansion allowed us to also install a kitchen space in the basement of Little Red Schoolhouse. This kitchen space was operated for 2 years under the management of a women's workers co-op as a cafe. Unfortunately, that project didn't work out. It did receive a lot of support from CAMI and CDEC at the time, but we feel like the seasonal mentality of the community kind of contributed to the failure of that venture, because people kind of looked to us to be the boss and the leaders, and they didn't see it as their own business, and they didn't take the leadership required to move it forward. And so being the opportunist that I am, after the cafe had shut down, I saw the unused space as an opportunity, and I saw the potential to support the community and to develop some type of revenue generation activity there. So I talked to the board and I convinced them to let me do some work and try to pilot some bakery and culinary heritage activities from there, with some workshops and some baked goods and things like that. So we can go to the first slide, Lorraine. So why did we want to develop a social enterprise? Because we wanted to take care of community business. After the board had given me some leeway and let me do some pilot projects, we realized very quickly that this was a viable and feasible business opportunity for the community. So CAMI as an organization in the beginning was managing the bakery and managing the staff, the revenues and everything. And at a certain point, we'd outgrown our original skin, and we had to figure out how we were going to restructure ourselves to be able to continue being a community development organization, but also how were we going to organize and manage business activities related to community development. We needed to minimize the risks for CAMI that were associated with operating the commercial activities. We needed to allow CAMI to focus on its original mandate. We needed to separate out the commercial activities from the development activities. We needed to capitalize on new funding opportunities, because we didn't fit in the boxes of business grants and opportunities. So it was to how could we access those opportunities. It was to establish a basis for additional economic opportunities for the community, to try to create more year-round employment as multifunctional enterprise, and to generate revenues to support also the social causes of CAMI. Next slide. So what were our project objectives? The project had 3 main objectives, which were to develop a social enterprise organization that would capture the economic potential from tourism, to develop and implement plans for social economic development in the areas of agritourism, cultural tourism, and product development, products that would highlight the heritage of the English-speaking community of the Magdalen Islands. And the third objective was to develop and implement a marketing strategy that would increase the visibility of the community and its tourism tourism products and services, increasing the economic value of the community. Next slide. So what were some of the outcomes of the project? In addition to the funding that was received from the Secretariat, we were also able to leverage an additional $50,000 in grants to develop the social enterprise. We became a registered nonprofit social enterprise organization on April 17th, 2018. We were able to develop our governance model, all of our legal documents like our bylaws, Constitution, our overall business plan was established. We were able to create our overall brand. We became recognized by the Pôle d'économie sociale. We were able to purchase equipment. We had startup expenses that were covered. We elaborated a business plan for the entry island activities, and a business plan that was elaborated for the bakery and pickling production in collaboration with McGill University. Next slide. So these are just some of the partnerships that we were able to form along the way. So with Concordia, with the MRC, Inuweave, the SADC, McGill, and other local tourism businesses and organizations. Next slide. So what does our future hold? We're currently in the process of doing a large renovation project in one of our communities, which is Entry Island, and we're upgrading an old school that was closed for educational services in 2014. So we became owners of that building, and we're right now in the process of developing, of renovating the school to become a community center / museum. And our phase 2 of that project, our hope is to develop a youth hostel that would be operated by the social enterprise. So CAMI would own the building, operate the museum. Eventually, youth hostel would be part of the social enterprise. And we became recently a member of the Econo Musée Network Society, and we're also working with them to expand and enhance the historical heritage complex, to make an addition to one of our buildings to house the bakery, because the bakery has become so successful, and it's also outgrown its space. So where we're at right now is too small. We're not able to meet the demand that we have, because we don't have the production capacity, because we don't have the facilities. So we're in the process of working on a second development plan. So we're hoping that the Entry Island plan will be implemented in 2022, and that this plan will be implemented in 2023. So we have the social enterprise is allowing us to be able to capitalize on business opportunities around tourism and cultural heritage, that, helping us to build a sense of community, a sense of belonging to the community, while creating other opportunities in economic development.
Thank you very much, Helena. That's a very interesting and complex project. I'm now pleased to turn to our fourth speaker, Sylvia Martin-Laforge. Sylvia is Executive Director of Quebec Community Groups Network, and she's here to talk about the work that the QCGN did for this grant. Sylvia?
Thank you, everybody. I just unmuted. I'm going to take the opportunity to use that first slide to tell you a little bit about QCGN. The QCGN is a provincial, network working with many stakeholders. And over the past few months, we have engaged in a very important, critical consultation, and have heard from a number of personal interviews and consultations with stakeholders. And it's confirmed that the QCGN exists to serve and advocate strongly for the English-speaking community of Quebec, our vision and our future, so that our institutions and culture will continue to thrive, flourish, and contribute to Quebec society. So then, in that context, we have a major funder is Canadian Heritage, and we're pleased to accept funding from the Secretariat. Is it already 2.5 years ago? To do some work specifically in better understanding the connection with the provincial government. Okay, so the first slide, knowledge and awareness. Foster effective relationship with the government of Quebec and raise awareness of community realities and priorities. That was around fostering alignment and dialogue. So everything we had to think about over the next few years was already being done in the QCGN, because that's the nature of the work. But it was allowing us to dive a bit deeper into the communication with the provincial government. Research and analysis for a vital community. So a strong understanding of policy gaps and its impact on our community. And Bill will remember from years ago, there was a policy gap study that was done mostly around, or almost exclusively around, federal government gaps. So our hope was we would be able to delve deeper into the policy gaps in the provincial government. And then a sharing of expertise with the community sector, institutions, stakeholders, and English-speaking Quebecers at large. So within this project, we also had specific deliverables. One of the deliverables, in fact, that was helpful today, in an event today, was a community portrait based on the Charter of the French language about municipalities, how they were designed, researched, and completed. And it was completed in March and September, and where the analysis is currently being used in support of a conversation around municipalities. And as you will see, January 28th, that was today, we had that conversation around municipalities. And why that was important, as we know, municipalities are important to everyday lives of Quebecers. So the feds do the big stuff, province is really important, but those municipalities allow us to do specific things in our everyday life. So that first bullet helped us with today. And as you see, the deliverables, we have one more deliverable on an information strategy. Everything we've done in terms of this big project has allowed us to just move further into the work, to see the resources, to see how, in fact, it supports our community vitality, including the consultations with the stakeholders in intersectional topics. Ongoing gap analysis with community stakeholders. So we work very hard with stakeholders and community leaders, and we will be mapping this piece of work out for the Secretariat. And in our community, in this developing of the gaps analysis, there is a recognition that strategies need to build community capacity to form a common vision of the resources and representation needed for the English-speaking community to remain vital, as well as a shared understanding of how legislative policy and programs shape vitality. I'm very aware today of my colleagues who have presented before me, the products, the importance that each of those products bring to the vitality of their local community, or have a broader impact. Where we hope to do some work is in transformational activities. So when we think about policy gaps, we are thinking about the gaps around funding. Are there indicators used to fund community organizations, programs, and services while allowing for funds to be distributed equitably to the English-speaking community? The Secretariat has played a very important role in filling those, in filling some of those gaps. But we know that different ministries have got to pay attention to funding directly from their pots, their envelopes. So that is one of the gaps around funding that we hear about continuously. Data and evaluation. Do we have adequate supporting data on English-speaking community experience in specific sectors to inform policy decisions in those sectors? The answer would be no. Because the way the structure is in Quebec, the data is either it's there, it's not made available, or it isn't separated out by language. And without the data, maybe the government has it, but the community doesn't have it. It's hard for us to make the case in requesting funding for that to be evidence-based. Representation. Does the English-speaking community have the representation it needs in government and civil society to influence legislation, policy, and programs? We heard today in the municipal sector conversation that in fact, neither in the representation of elected officials, nor in the workplace are there people who come from English-speaking community, representing the community and understanding the needs of the community to put forth or advocate for change. We know about the civil service of Quebec that is less than 1%. I think it's even less than that in the municipalities. That's what we were hearing today. The last piece, legislation. Our legislative and bureaucratic, I'm sure that that's a typo, adapted to the unique needs of English-speaking community. And the legislation really does many times drive the programs and the funding. So we've often said when we were advocating for the Secretariat that it should be in legislation. So those that frame right now is the frame that we are looking through for the policy gaps. The sharing of expertise with the community. So to fill those four quadrants, the quadrants there, we absolutely need to connect more and more with our folks to have more and more consultation. So that's what we've been doing. And as I said, the resources have been very important from the Secretariat because it has allowed us to delve deeper into some of these issues. And for that, we're grateful. And thank you very much, both to Bill, who was there at the Secretariat at the beginning, and to QUESCREN, who has absolutely, as everybody has said, been a very an easy group to work with. Thank you.
You say that, and now I'm going to cut you off. Thank you, Sylvia, because unfortunately, the time allotted for your presentation is up. So, Patrick?
Hello. Good afternoon, everybody. I am briefly taking over from Lorraine since she will be presenting. So, Lorraine, please go ahead with your presentation, and then I'll be moderating the questions.
Thanks, Patrick, and please let me know if I run over time. I'm from the Quebec English-Speaking Communities Research Network, and as I mentioned, we managed the overall project and did some of our own activities with this grant. QUESCREN is a collaborative network of researchers, stakeholders, and educational and other institutions that improves understanding of English-speaking communities of Quebec and promotes their vitality. Next slide. So I'm going to just tell a couple of stories. We did a number of activities. I can't do an overall report of what we did, but I'll tell you a couple of stories that emerged in the context of us working on the activities for this grant. The first thing, we received funding through this grant to do research, and part of the research was to do research on levels of employment of Quebec's English speakers in the Quebec civil service. And I took out the salient quote from that document, which you can find on our QUESCREN research website. The proportion of mother tongue English speakers in the Quebec public service has hovered around 1% since the early 1970s. And in case that's not clear to you, that is much lower than the proportion of English speakers in the Quebec population. So the story there is how this grant has allowed us to deepen our understanding of the English-speaking community, including in its relationship with the government itself. And as Sylvia just said, there's a lot of work to do. We have a road to hoe for this, a road to hoe to move forward on this file. Next slide, please. The next story is about QUESCREN's researcher member group. On your screen there, you see Dorothy Williams and Anthony Damasio. Those are two of the 60 scholars that we've assembled from Quebec, Canada, and abroad, who do research on different aspects of English-speaking Quebec. So we have people in our network who do research on arts, on culture, on women, on Black communities, economic development, history, on and on it goes. I invite you to visit our website to learn more. Just to let you know how active they are, this group published last year. They all publish on other topics as well, or most of them do. But last year alone, that group did 19 publications. They're listed in our annual report. And the topics ranged, again, widely from the LGBTQ plus community to language use to community life and so on. So the story there is helping to develop a field of study called English-speaking Quebec. Next slide. Another important use we made of our funding was to hold education forums. Now, the story here, which is one that's very complex, is the real challenges that the English language educational sector has in Quebec. As many of you know, the enrollment numbers for primary and secondary schools are down. The schools face challenges to continue, but they're more than primary and secondary. They're also cégep and universities. So another part of the story is how the different levels or the continuum of education work together in events like our forums, which are listed here, which brought together key participants, actors, and stakeholders to talk about challenges and strategic solutions. So I invite you to read the report on our 2018 forum, and there's one coming up soon for our 2020 event. Next. This is the last little story I have. Helena mentioned her social enterprise activity. We partnered up with her organization, CAMI, to develop a series of 6 films on English speakers of Entry Island. Now picture this, Entry Island is a tiny island, one of the Magdalen Islands. Its population, Helena can fill me in, but it's certainly under 100. And we managed to track down 6 of them and have interviews about their lives back in the past and today on Entry Island and beyond. And those films will be launched in 2021. And Helena and her social enterprise will use them to build knowledge and to create content for the museum project that's part of her larger social enterprise project. So those are the activities I wanted to mention today. Thank you.
We have time for one question. Please go ahead and write your questions in the chat. While you're doing so, Lorraine, if you could let people know how, if anyone is doing research out there on English-speaking Quebec and is not part of our researcher member group, how they can go about.
Sure, that's a good, sorry, Patrick. Yeah, that's a great idea. So if you go to QUESCREN.ca, and you will see a section for researcher members, and we have an online form where you can apply. So we asked you a little bit about you and your research. We have a small committee that looks at your application, and then, you know, if you meet certain requirements, we invite you to become a member. And at that point, you will receive emails, and we will include you in certain activities and invite you to share your research with the broader community. Thank you.
Question from Susan O'Donnell. Do you find it challenging to do community-based research in a university environment?
Hello, Susan. That is my sister. That's a great question. Concordia is very community-oriented, and so, like, as a general approach, it's certainly supported. That being said, communities and universities operate in different ways. So certainly one of the challenges is to basically act as a liaison. It's not always an easy role between, if I can put it this way, the bureaucracy of the university and the tendency for more informality on the part of community groups. Thank you.
So I think we've run out of time for questions. Lorraine, I'll pass the mic back on to you.
Thanks. I'm wearing multiple hats. Thanks so much, Patrick. William Flock was hoping to be able to invite a representative of the Quebec government to attend today. William, is he available?
No, unfortunately, he's not able to join us. If I could, though, perhaps I'll do some of what he was going to do. Is that all right with you?
Yes, please.
First of all, thank you, everybody, for sharing with us and with all of the participants here today some of the good work that you're doing. It's truly impressive. And as we noted at the beginning, this initiative came together rather quickly in this sort of the first 3 months of the startup of the Secretariat. And we were very pleased and proud to be able to work with Concordia and the organizations you've heard from here today. We did a similar exercise with McGill, and over there we worked with Youth Employment Services, with townshippers, and with McGill itself, and eventually John Abbott College and a couple of other players. So clearly the community organizations and the institutional players came to the table quickly and worked with us, and we're very, very pleased with that cooperation and with what has flowed out of that work. I want to maybe just take the opportunity to give a quick little bit of, I guess, insider response to some of the projects we heard about here today, because one of the things that struck me is like in each of them, it was like planting seeds in a certain way. And I'll maybe share with you a little bit the first one in terms of what we heard from ELAN about the work they're doing with arts, culture, and education. And I'll recount to you, in the early part of my career, I was a teacher, actually on the Lower North Shore, and that question was asked of Lorraine about the work that was done with the Littoral School Board. And I recall at the time, and the same kinds of situation that we're describing here today, that remote, isolated communities, and even in most regional circumstances, there's very little presence of professional artists and professional arts that is being offered to the population. And of course, that means that for the children in schools, the families, everybody, it's just a gap. You can kind of see it at a distance through television and movies and so on, but it's not really a part of your life at all. And at the time, the Littoral School Board worked out some kind of arrangement with the Quebec Labrador Foundation, which did a lot of important community development work in some regions, especially in Eastern Quebec. And I recall that we had an artist. She was actually a professional clown, a woman named Linda St. Onge. She was hired under a project from the Quebec Labrador Foundation to come in and work with teachers in schools, and she was able to do work in the school where I was actually a teacher, but also to work with kids. And Linda was a very creative and interesting, wonderful person. The first introduction, there was no news from the kids at all to the school, rather, that this person was going to be arriving and working on this. She dressed up, in that Pierrot costume, the white face, the mime, with the black and white striped outfit and so on. And her first introduction to my class, a group of secondary 1 and 2 students, she opened the door quietly and crept in from the back of the class. I could see her, the kids couldn't. And then just kind of moved stealthily through the aisles. You have not seen kids' eyes so quickly. Like, what is this? Who is this? What's going on? Like, it was a marvelous introduction. And then over a month in our school, she did an incredible array of programs and was very inspirational, not only to the kids, but to the teachers, and helped us in our professional development. So I guess I had that early experience as a teacher to realize that I only had so many means and so many opportunities and skill sets, really, to be able to provide what was needed. And the notion of partnering and bringing in resources from other sectors is something that, very clearly, I think is both absolutely needed. But I think through, 15 years now of work with community learning centers and the work at Learn and all of that, connections they're building with community, I think there's a growing set of opportunities for schools to benefit from community resources and essentially open the doors and have more back and forth. So I was very gratified to hear what ELAN has accomplished with that, and as you can tell from the personal anecdote, I'm very much inspired by it. So bravo and continue. I think that there was also in the question and back and forth with Christy some discussion about what happens when in the circumstances of the COVID pandemic and what's going to happen afterwards. Those are really important questions, and they're questions that are important to us to think about as well. And we've had a little bit of conversation with ELAN about how the Secretariat can help some of the ELAN member groups when we think of, say, you know, sites that host music or theater. I mean, what are they doing? I mean, individual artists, maybe you can make a pivot and you can find ways to do it. But if you're a company, if you're an enterprise in the arts and culture sector, you face an uncertain future. And if we can provide some ways to help people make that pivot at a structural organizational self, we're kind of exploring those ideas. So I think that's great. For the ETRC one, you know, having lived and worked for many years in the Eastern Townships, I know this concept of late loyalists. I remember when I was at Townshippers, for a while, the Eastern Townships tourism body wanted to make the Chemin des Loyalistes like the centerpiece of the you know, of the tourism development strategy for the Eastern Townships. And it took groups like Townshippers and others and ETRC at the time to point out that, well, if you're going to have a Chemin des Loyalistes, it would be very short road in the Eastern Townships, because most English speakers came to the Eastern Townships not as loyalists, but rather as folks who came, you know, from the United States 15, 20 years after the revolution, and they were looking for land, you know, and they were expanding in that way. So there was kind of a myth about the English speakers, and it's always, and still, as Fabian's nodding, still necessary to debunk that myth. But I would also maybe make the point that in some ways, the Eastern Townships English speakers are in a well set up situation, in the sense that because you know, we do have Champlain College and Bishops and the ETRC located in the region, there are opportunities to document and study and celebrate the history of the English-speaking community that most other regions of Quebec do not have. There's not an equivalent. There aren't, you know, the only two regions that have universities are Montreal and the Eastern Townships. So, you know, how does it look for the opportunities to know oneself, to document your own history and so on in other regions? Obviously, many, many fewer institutional resources. So I would then underline, and this is another kind of, we also very much enjoyed, as everybody has testified here today, the support and the administrative capacity of Lorraine and her team, Patrick, and all of the others at QUESCREN. It's given us confidence that we can work with QUESCREN to also use them as kind of a vehicle for broader involvement in other projects. And we're not going to talk about it today, but there is a major initiative that we started last winter with QUESCREN called Community, that links together many players. And I'll just underline, there'll be a follow-up event on February 9th where the Quebec Anglophone Heritage Network, who were supported through a similar kind of parallel initiative to this one, they've mobilized, I think, 10 local historical societies and museums across Quebec to try to explore and celebrate and contribute to a greater sense of belonging and pride in being English-speaking Quebecers, which again, you can see the seeds through these first round of projects are now being kind of watered and nurtured and expanded upon. So that's very good to see. But I would say, though, that nonetheless, we do have many regions that don't have the institutional assets that others do, and we need to be, I guess, creative to find ways to support that. I think, for example, you know, in the arts culture sector, the notion that some of the Montreal resources are being made available in the regions through ELAN's work. That's a good way to do it. I think QUESCREN's interest in working with people on the Magdalen Islands or the Lower North Shore, that's also an interesting way to extend the resources and to make linkages. So all good. For the project that Helena Burke talked about, CAMI's social economy project, a number of people on this call and some of the people from my team got out to the Magdalen Islands in July of 2019 for a leadership training seminar. So we were there for 4 or 5 days. Wonderful opportunity to visit an amazing region of Quebec, but also an amazing opportunity to see up close the kind of work that Helena Burke and CAMI are doing with their social economy project. That again has been, I think, very important kind of model for many other regions to look at and learn from. But it also inspired us to do further thinking about really the absence of English-speaking communities from Quebec's social economy movement. And it's not a complete absence, but it's a very important body of work, and Quebec society is heavily engaged in social economy as one of the major sectors of I guess, community development, economic development, and employability. So with that in mind, when the Plan d'Action Gouvernemental en Économie Sociale was launched last fall, we were very pleased to have our Secretariat and 2 initiatives that we're working on currently highlighted in that action plan. So one is that we've signed an agreement with the Corporation de Développement Régional de Québec, who work a lot to support in French organizations that want to explore mounting a social economy project, how to navigate the funding patterns, where do you go to, how do you do this, and so on. So with our support, they're going to do a lot of translation and reach out and offer an accompaniment service to English language communities that want to embark on social economy projects. So we're very pleased with that. And in tandem with the Regional Development Network and folks at Concordia, including QUESCREN and others. We're also working towards creating a center of expertise on social economy. So again, from these small seeds, we start to build up and see some things. Just a small little observation too, of course, we always have the backdrop. We can do wonderful development work and build bridges and everybody's happy and we're all, loving working together. And then sometimes we do have, there's a context of language issues. And, I think Sylvia rightly pointed out that we do always have to think about the policy context and making sure people get there and so on and so forth. But I will just make a small observation about the trip we made to CAMI and watching, I think there was the official inauguration of one of the heritage sites that's part of their social economy project. And one of the speakers at this session was Joël Arsenault, who is the Parti Québécois, member of the National Assembly for that region, and the Parti Québécois language critic. Okay, so you got to figure, okay, he's got a certain positioning. Well, lo and behold, he was also the translator for CAMI's material from English to French. So he works, you've got the PQ language critic, who is a collaborator with the English language community organization. So obviously there's bridges, there's connections, and I thought that was really, you kind of had to shake your head and say that, we might think front page of the newspaper, CAMI's at war with Joël Arsenault. No, in fact, they're partners. So I can see Helena smiling in the background, but I remember being really struck by that. And of course, we need to encourage and foster those relationships as well. In terms of the overview that Sylvia gave, the whole notion of policy gaps and understanding important areas where the English speaking is not present, that's very important work. And it will sometimes lead into being in a somewhat more conflictual situation. It kind of goes with the territory, and I appreciate that we can have lots of fun with all these good news stories on one side. They're necessary, we need to do them. But somebody also has to do the kind of work that QCGN is doing. So no problems there at all. I will say that on the particular municipal in our consultations in both rounds, we heard very much about that idea that the municipal sector is one that is underdeveloped. There are problems. People feel isolated. They have challenges. The municipalities they have an obligation and a possibility of offering services in both English and French. They don't always have the means to do it, and they face challenges. It's another sector where they're at a distance from say governments and the way they work. So I'll just mention, we've signed 2 agreements, one with the MRC de Gulf Saint Laurent, which is the most isolated municipal situation, the lower North Shore of Quebec. So along with the 5 municipalities, the MRC, Ministère des Affaires municipales et de l'Habitation, and the Secretariat, we've developed a common frame to try to work to bring those municipalities, sort of increase their capacity, but also to bring them closer into a dialogue with the government of Quebec, with some of the key ministries. The other one I'll mention is that, and this is just kind of hot off the presses, we're just signing it this week, there's the Association des Directeurs Municipaux du Québec, which is an association of the Director Generals of municipalities. So I've signed an agreement that will enable them to increase the professional development and translation and support to be able to provide better resources and support to the municipalities that are trying to serve in English their population. And that includes both the Section 29.1 municipalities, those that have a legal right and obligation to do so, but also others, even more French language municipalities that nonetheless have an English-speaking clientele. So we see those as also very, very important kind of signs of progress. Definitely lots of potential for collaboration. And maybe I'll just finish off by saying that Lorraine in the QScreen piece highlighted the study that they conducted, and it's really kind of an historical background to that under participation of English speakers in the Quebec Public Service. And as a direct follow-up to that and other employability challenges, we were able in the last year or so to secure, I think, probably 3 or 4 different major sort of steps forward to respond to various gaps. One would be that we're now funding, and Bishop University is our kind of player, a consortium of post-secondary institutions, the CEGEPs and universities. The major dossier they're working with us, and they may do other things in the future, we're not limiting that, but they're working on employability in a general way, helping young graduates make the transition from the classroom to the workplace, but also with a heavy focus on the Quebec Public Service, understanding better the barriers. How do we create programs and approaches so English-speaking youth feel more empowered and feel like the Quebec Public Service is a real option for them? So that's work that they've started, and we're very pleased to accompany them in that. So it's fun for me to be able to say that even though these projects came together very quickly, I think as you've heard today, they have real and positive responses, or rather effects already. So bravo to each of the supporters of this project. But I think without too much trouble, we can also illustrate how they've been a kind of they've had a trampoline effect that we've built on some of these early initiatives, and now we're taking things a step further to create a more structured response to some of those things. And maybe I'll just close by saying that from a couple of ad hoc initiatives with Concordia and McGill in the first few months of the Secretariat, which supported really good initiatives like this, we're very pleased now to be in a position where we have a solid funding program that it's in the family of Quebec funding programs. So we're part of an interdepartmental committee of Action Communautaire Autonome, which gives us an amazing vantage point and an ability to interact with other ministries to attack some of the more structural problems that do exist, but also to the point, and I think Sylvia gave an interesting point of sort of a note of caution in a certain way, is that just as, you know, my previous work when I worked for the federal government through the 90s, the reflex for other departments who were coming to take an interest in minority communities would be, oh, Canadian Heritage does that. Everything would be shipped over to Canadian Heritage. There's a risk right now in our Secretariat that other departments say, oh, it's great you're there. We'll send everybody to you. We don't want to be a parallel government. We want to encourage those other departments to assume their responsibilities, to build their own relations with English-speaking Quebecers. And I think we see lots of potential and lots of promising signs. So we're going to always be alert to the sort of consequences of the advice we give and the way we act. But that being said, from the ability to mount a couple of ad hoc projects with universities, which we've really appreciated, we're now in a position where currently in this fiscal year and next fiscal year, we're operating at about $9 million in funding. And within 2 or 3 years, that could be up around 15, 16 million a year. Don't know for sure. There's some things that we're still working out. But what it means is that unlike the period prior to the creation of the Secretariat, when we did our first round of consultations that led to this initiative, where essentially the English-speaking community would be looking towards the federal government for financial support and for sustenance and even moral support. I believe that the creation of the Secretariat is an invitation for the English-speaking community to direct its energies to the government of Quebec. And is it going to be perfect? Are you going to be happy with every response you get? Not at all. But are there opportunities? Absolutely. And I'm very much a kind of a half glass full kind of person, and I would say that we've just started to fill the glass. That you know, heck with a glass. Let's talk about a pitcher. You know, there's really lots of potential on the horizon. So I just wanted to thank Lorraine and QUESCREN, and thank all of those who have mounted these projects to date. Keep up the good work, but I think we can see some tangible results already. Thank you, Lorraine.
Thank you very much, William. And I'm going to wrap up our event now. Anna Hunt, thank you so much for your excellent, as always, technical support and organizational support for making this event happen. But I will say, just to speak to my partners, Fabian, Sylvia, Helena, and Christy, it's been wonderful working with you. I look forward to new opportunities in the future, and of course to the Secretariat, our warmest thanks, and to William Flock for having the vision and drive to make this project happen on, turning around on a dime. It's been a really excellent experience. So all the best to everyone. Please visit QUESCREN.ca to look up more events. Next month, we've got events on English-speaking Black communities and the Mi'kmaq English-speaking community of Listigouche in Eastern Quebec. You're more than welcome to attend, and visit the partner websites to see what they're up to, because they also all have a lot of activities and events that you can enjoy. Without further ado, I'll say goodbye, and we'll see you next time. Bye, everyone.